Welcome, artist and aspiring artist, to Monet Cafe. I'm artist Susan Jenkins, and if you want to learn more about painting with soft pastel, you've come to the right place. Today's lesson is going to be keeping it fresh. I did this lesson kind of with myself in mind because I've been rushing through my last few paintings, so I took a lot of time to plan things out, and I wanted to share with you the benefits of doing that. First, I'm doing a little value study combination sketch. I'm using a photo that I got from paintmyphoto.com, but I altered it myself in Photoshop. I'll share more about that later. Right now I'm showing you how I've learned over the years to see the negative shapes. That's always a really good ability to learn, and the more you practice, the better it gets. So I'm using some charcoal pencils for the sketch. Right here I'm showing you how I use an X-Acto blade to sharpen my pencil, and then I use just a piece of sandpaper to get a sharper point. Now here I've sped the sketch up a bit, but I'm going to talk through it. You may notice here, you probably can see the little grid lines that I've put up not only on my sketch paper, which is a gray toned paper. I prefer working on something gray rather than white when I sketch, but I've also put the marks on my reference image. These are just halfway points horizontally and vertically. They will help you if you're working on something that you kind of got to get it accurate, like a vase and things like that. You want to take a little time to get it right, like I didn't do there. It's fine to erase it and get it right again, or try to make it correct, because it really is going to influence the professional quality of your final painting. And I don't use these grids anymore. I mean, I will if something is very intricate, a portrait or a pet portrait, but in general I don't, because I've kind of learned to see this way. And the more that you do this and you practice this, the more you'll be able to do it more automatically and don't have to take the effort to actually draw these lines out. You'll notice when I get to the painting part that I don't put any grid marks down. And again, it just gets better, like everything, the more that you do it. So this is basically just a value study. My charcoal pencils, I have 3 different values. I have a dark, a medium, and a light. And you can use just one charcoal pencil or whatever you want and vary the values based on your pressure and kind of your stroke work. So again, I'm just getting in typical or basic values and where my darkest darks are, my lightest lights are, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more as we go about value in general, and how I've had a habit of doing this myself is to make things too light or too dark too quickly. And you want to make sure your darkest darks and your lightest lights have some impact. That you don't want them everywhere. In other words, most of your painting is going to be those mid values, and the darkest darks and lightest lights are there for drama or contrast. And so I'm learning personally to get better at that. Also too, I'm going to be, when I get to the painting part after the sketch, I'm going to be talking about painting with negative shapes. This is something I've learned to do over the years, and again, this is going to help you with your drawing skills and painting skills, and help you to get more accuracy by seeing positive and negative shapes. I find that's a very powerful habit you can create, or ability or skill you can create as an artist. All right, here's the final little sketch, and this is the reference image that I did alter in Photoshop. Like I said, I got it from Paint My Photo, pmp-art.com. This is where I altered it even further in Photoshop by using a filter called a Cutout Filter. I'll be talking about that more later. It basically just simplifies your shapes even more. Here is the collection of soft pastels I'm using, and I began by doing a value study of blues for my underpainting of sorts, okay? And this is where you're going to see me using negative shapes, using this value study with the 4 or 5 different values of blues. Now notice I haven't put the grid marks on. I have made little points of where my halfway points are around the image, but I haven't actually drawn the line. And I'm getting in the negative shapes around the vase. I am basically seeing those shapes that are, if you don't understand what negative and positive is the image itself. Negative is the thing that surrounds the main image, okay? So those background shadows behind the roses, the tabletop, the shadows underneath the roses. So I know that the background at the top is very dark, and also underneath the vase is very dark, and the tabletop is more of a mid value. So notice how I just negatively painted in that vase with roses. Now I'm using a piece of pipe foam insulation. It's just a good blending tool. It's not great to blend your overly blend your work throughout your entire painting process, but it's really good at the beginning to my board keeps moving, to go ahead and blend it in. It gives a softness to the underpainting, and it gets rid of those hard edges. I'm holding my board at the top so it doesn't slide. I need to prepare more before I videotape. I always admire all these other artists who make videos and have everything so professional, and I don't know. I'm glad you guys hang in there with me. Okay, so now I'm going to start getting in the values, still just using the different values of blues. I'm kind of using some neutral blues too, nothing too punchy in color. And I wanted to point out here, a lot of times things are darker in value than you think. Sometimes we want to give a highlight too soon, like I was mentioning before. Those roses that are at the bottom of the vase are really pretty much in shadow. And now the roses that I'm working on now, they're definitely lighter, but they're not going to be my lightest light. The lightest light is going to be, I know you can't see all of the reference image up there, but the lightest light is going to be the tips of those petals. Now I did get some darks in right here. Notice that's more of a mid to dark value, and I'm getting that kind of where the centers of the roses are and where some of those shadows are. And so I'm just continuing to work on this, and by the time I'm finished with this, I'm going to have a basic value study before I begin my painting. It does a couple of things. It gets me established with value. It gives a good core foundation for where you're going to head with the painting, and it covers up that majority of blank surface that you've been working on. And by the way, this is UArt sanded paper. It's 400 grit. And if you're new to pastels, yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's sandpaper. Pastels, if you want to get a lot of layering, working on a sanded surface is best, although you can definitely work on regular paper too. I tend to find that artists who are good on regular paper usually have very good drawing skills. They don't have to do a lot of correcting. I am sorry for my hair that was flopping around in there. Oh my goodness, I often admire the artist whose final videos are so professionally done. So I finally pulled my hair back, obviously. All right, so I've got me a little value study here. Notice I don't have my darkest darks so overly dark, and I don't have a lot of lights in yet. Okay, so this is kind of just more of a muted value study that is general, not too high contrast. Okay, so now it's time to start painting. Now I am going to go ahead and get in some of my darker values. Since I have my underpainting established, I'm using some purples for the shadows underneath the vase, and I think a little bit of maybe deeper blues. It's kind of like two different values of purple that I use here for the shadows. Purples are, and there's the blue that I was using. Purples are good color to use for shadows, purples and blues in general. All right, so I'm going to continue to kind of establish values. Even though I have a value study, I'm still focusing on values at this point and adding a bit more color. And I'm finding that I really am liking doing a neutral value study prior to painting. That's why I've been talking about and creating some videos that talk more about neutrals. I just got a new set that has a lot of neutrals in it. I actually bought my own Christmas present. I mentioned that in the last video I did. My husband and I, we were just like, why don't we just buy our own Christmas presents? Because I tell him, you know, what I want, he tells me what he wants, and we already know what it is. So I went ahead and got mine, and I had to break into him. I'm not using my Christmas present for this particular video, but I am going to be sharing with you guys what I got. And oh my goodness, it's so exciting. I'm just so excited. And I have to again thank my patrons. My patrons are the reason, you guys who have been supporting me on my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Susan Jenkins, where each of the patrons contributes $5 a month to support me and my channel. And it has allowed me to buy more pastels. Also, if you notice the video quality better, I'm using my iPhone 11 Pro Max. The video capability and the photo capability, camera capability is just amazing. So thank you, patrons, and everyone who watches Monet Cafe here for free should thank the patrons too, because they're the reason Monet Cafe is getting better. All right, let me talk about this painting. See now how I got in my darkest values. I know that dark behind the roses is very dark. I know that the dark underneath the vase is very dark. Those are my darkest darks. I do soften that background later. I think you'll see how I do that. Now I'm working on the shapes within the vase. All right, you'll notice I don't actually, except for just very slightly, I think at the end, I do some shadows on the edges of the vase, but notice I haven't drawn a line for the vase. It's called like lost edges. It's how you can have a painterly look by not creating a line, but creating an edge. What's the difference between a line and an edge? Well, a line is a line. An edge is where two values meet or two shapes meet. Without a line, you get an idea or an illusion of a line, but it's really just the edge between two shapes or two values. And it does create a much more painterly effect. Again, notice I don't have a line on that vase, but I will gradually start to paint the shapes within the vase. And I've learned myself over the years you kind of zone out. You try to forget that you're painting a vase because our brain wants to think of the glass. We want to start kind of shaping the glass and focusing on the solid part of the glass, whereas really just like I said, zone out. Look at the shapes within the glass, and you're just painting shapes and values. Shapes and values. That's really all of painting is painting shapes and values. And so I'm getting in those, and then as you add the reflections and things like that at the end, that will give the illusion of the glass. I'm putting in these stems, and I'm also curving them in such a way that will also help to increase that illusion of a rounded glass, kind of like the stems are being bent up by the sides of the vase, and that really does help to give that roundness, that spherical, three-dimensional quality of the vase. All right, I think I'm going to put on some music and let this go for a while you enjoy the painting process, but I will come back in as I see commentary needed. All right, guys, I hope you're learning a lot here, and I'm really trying to make these videos valuable to you. By the way, always comment if you have a suggestion about a particular video or lesson that you'd like to see. I love your comments, and also subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, so that would be great. I'd really appreciate that. All right, guys, enjoy this process. I'll be back soon. Okay, so it's taking shape, but I wanted to point out here how I still have not used my lightest values for the flowers. I do have some of the light values in the vase, you know, kind of getting the reflections in there, but the flowers are still definitely the ones that are kind of underneath in shadow. They are darker values. And I know I've talked about this before about if you're ever in doubt about values, just squint your eyes, look at your reference image. Or actually, I've done this before, painting in a darker or dimly lit room. That helps you to see values better. Now I'm starting to get in little bits of the lightest values that are just on those delicate tips of the roses, where the source of light is, kind of from the upper left area. And again, the topic of this video, I mean, I could have named this video multiple things. Learning to paint with negative shapes, painting a neutral value study before painting, before beginning. But I decided to call it Keeping It Fresh because that's been a personal goal of mine. There's been times when I've done roses in the past where I have just given it too much detail. And I'm learning, or my goal, I've admired it for years of how people are able to do this, but it's my personal goal to learn to, less is more, kind of like I had at the heading. Less is definitely more. Keep things simplified, and that is how you end up keeping things fresh too, is not overworking things. And I do think that the initial planning stages, if you do take the time to plan a painting and to do a little study prior to painting, all of those things are going to benefit and intensify keep the fresh look of your painting, because you will have already worked out some of the other issues before. And I have a term that I use. I don't know if it's a professional art term. I just kind of came up with it on my own, but I call it efficiency of stroke, meaning have you ever seen an artist who the work just looks so fresh and beautiful, and every stroke just looks like it's in the perfect place with not one stroke wasted in any unnecessary place. And that's why I call it efficiency of stroke. You learn to say the most with the least, if that makes sense. And so that's a goal of mine. So that was another reason I called Keeping It Fresh, because that's what I'm trying to do. And when we don't get things correct, I'm not saying get so fussy that, oh, you're so stiff when you're painting, every line has to be great. You want fresh and loose stroke work, but you don't want it haphazard or wasted. I recently, it was actually kind of coincidental, I guess, that we had the theme for roses this month, and then artists that many of us in Monet Cafe on Facebook, the art group on Facebook, admire the work of Alan Picard, and he just happened to do a painting. They weren't roses, they are peonies. Is that how you say those flowers? They look like roses in a way, but he happened to do a demo recently that was awesome. Check it out, by the way, if you want. And he has that quality. He's an amazing artist, and he has what I call efficiency of stroke. He basically, when he adds his lines, it's just like, oh, look how perfect that one line was. It just needed to be there, and it's just so perfect. I think that we keep our work more fresh looking when we develop those skills. And again, when we kind of pre-plan some things and kind of have a direction of where we're going. Now, there are artists who have painted for so long that they've just gotten so good that they don't need as much preparatory planning work to begin with. They've just really just gotten that good. And I like spontaneous painting myself. Sometimes I just don't have the time to prepare. And sometimes I just want to get into the moment. It's not about creating a masterpiece or anything. All right, so now you can see here I am adding those tips that are more highlighted by the light source. And remember though, when you go to add the highlights, like the ones that are lower on that flower, if you squint your eyes and look at the reference image, some of the lower highlights aren't as light as the ones up top. Getting those values right is going to be what makes that believable. And that's, you know, I talk constantly about value And I'm assuming everybody who's watching this video knows what value is. It's just the how dark or light something is, the color is. And if you get value right, you're just about 90% good. The expression I like is color gets the glory, but value does the work. I love that. I can't remember who originally said it. I've heard multiple artists say it, but it is absolutely true. And that is one way your work will look amateur, is if you don't have your values correct. Wanted to mention too that I changed the format. You might have noticed in the sketch it was the reference image. Oh, there's my dog barking. The reference image was, I think it was 5 inches by 5.5, but I decided I wanted this to be more square, and I went with a 6 inch by 6 inch format. I am going to be donating this to the 65 Roses fundraiser for raising money for the cause of cystic fibrosis. An artist that I've become online friends with over the years, Billy Colson, has a gallery in Colorado, and she has headed up this fundraiser for many years, and I've tried to contribute pieces where they literally display the artwork and people buy the artwork. I'm not sure if it's like an auction or people just buy it, but artists donate their artwork, and 100% of the proceeds goes to the cystic fibrosis cause fundraiser. So it's a beautiful way to give and to give back as an artist. And we do have in our Monet Cafe art group on Facebook, our monthly theme this month is roses, and artists know that they have the option, you don't have to, but they have the option to give their painting to this fundraiser to help raise money. So it's a neat thing. So if you want to check that out, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, it is Monet Cafe Art Group on Facebook. There are some questions you have to answer, but it's just kind of about how'd you hear about the group, and what's your main medium you like. So if you're interested in learning more about soft pastels, you can get in the group as long as you're a real person. You know what I mean. Anyway, let's see. I failed to talk more about how I had taken that image and put it into Photoshop and put a filter on it. There's a filter, if you have Photoshop or you're familiar with it, in Photoshop that's called a Cutout Filter, and you basically can control the degree of how it kind of simplifies your shapes. And it was kind of a neat way for me to look at the most simplified form of this image, and it also kind of breaks values down a little bit for you. So it's kind of cool. And I know everybody doesn't have Photoshop, but there are some other photo editing, so many things available as apps on our phones now. That sometimes you can just increase the saturation, decrease the saturation. That's actually a really good way to see value. If you put your reference image into, something you can change or desaturate, meaning get rid of the color, that's a great thing to do. All right, here's the finished painting, and this was a lot of fun for me. I still want to simplify even further, so that's my next goal. So if you like this video, I really hope you'll comment and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find me on my Patreon page if you'd like to support this channel for $5 a month, and you can find me in all those other places. All right, guys, happy painting.